We'll be ready to start now. Again, thank you very much indeed for joining us for this latest e-permits webinar, Safety Digitally, is Permit to Work the Last Bastion of Paper? If anybody has any questions during the webinar session, there is on the little dashboard that you have on your screen an option for putting in some chat. My colleague Neil Hartley will be watching the chat, so he will log any questions that people have, and we'll then address those at the end of the session. So please feel free to ask any questions that you may have. So as I say, this is about permits to work and moving towards a digital version rather than the current paper process. So paper permits to work are still predominantly the method of deploying these across all industry sectors. Some have started to convert to electronic systems, but many people that I meet in first meetings are still embedded in a paper process. And when a paper process works, it works very well. When it doesn't, all sorts of problems can arise that can take a long time to sort out, particularly if there have been any incidents or accidents on the site. So where do these problems come from? The process is actually quite straightforward. It's the execution that always causes the problem. In reality, we must always make sure that RAMs have been approved before work can commence. We need to have checked all the training and competency of workers that are doing the work, and they should be checked before permits are approved as well. Different types of permits need different levels of approval. Some permits, like access permits, may only need a single sign-off by, for example, the site manager. But high-risk activities such as excavation or of hot works could require 2 or 3 or more people to sign it off, and obviously not always from the same organisation. You might need the parent company to sign off, as well as the FM company that are actually involved in engaging the contracts to do the work, because there may be different risks to the business as well as the infrastructure. All permits have got to be approved before work commences, and ideally before contractors turn up on site. I've been to many customers before and stood there, and when you get there early in the morning, there's a line of contractors waiting to get permits raised and signed off before they start work on the same day. Not a good place to be. So let's look at an example of a simple job that requires hot works to be done in a confined space. There are 2 different processes, one when all the permits are on a single sheet of paper, and another where there is a different sheet of paper for each permit type. So we're looking at the single sheet permits. One piece of paper needs to route itself around the organisation to many different people. So an access permit may need, for example, to be signed off by the site manager. Confined space permit probably needs to be signed off with someone in health and safety. Hot works might need 2, 3 or more people to sign off. And if a decision is made that an isolation is required, that will also require signing off by someone in technical services. And only when that one piece of paper has routed its way around the organisation, got all the signatures on it, is that document then ready. There's obviously single point failure problems. If someone's away on holiday or not available at the time it needs doing, the process gets held up. And that is a major problem in ensuring that permits to work are ready in time for the work to start, particularly if contractors are queuing up in the morning for work on the same day. Second process is looking at multiple permits. So here you've got multiple pieces of paper, one for each type of permit. And again, they get routed to the same people. And they all need to be approved, and they all need to come back into one bundle at the end of the process. There isn't so much a single point failure in a sequential process now, but there is still a point of failure if someone is not available. That one permit may not be in that bundle at the time that you need it. So whichever process you deploy, there is still risks involved in making sure everything is done on time. And before we do that, we need to check things. So is this contractor on our approved list? Do we have an approved list? Where is it held? How do we check that they're the right people? And are they still valid as a contractor? Are the guys that are going to send properly trained and inducted? We need to go and double check training certificates, make sure their inductions are up to date. I say we should go and check these things. And finally, where are the RAMs from the contractor? We need to double check that the way they're going to do the work is the way that they've stated they will do it. We either have an archive of them and we have to cross-check them, or we need the contractor to send them to us every time they submit a permit request. We would then need to go through them and read them and double check they're correct. And all this is happening while the poor guy in the permit office is faced with a queue of people at 8:30 in the morning ready to do work and pressure from above to make sure that things get done on time and keep the business running as efficiently as possible. I'm sure there are a few wry smiles amongst the audience at this point in time. Oh, and then, sorry, once work has started, we've got some other things to do. We've got to do paper pre-work audits for things like PPE. We've got to do dynamic risk assessments at the place of work. We've got to go through our safety precaution checklist for any high-risk activities. And also, we've got a paper closeout process, checklists and audits. And all these things have to be added to the permit bundle at different stages of the process, so that as a company, we are sure that we have a complete, correct, and evidenced audit trail just in case there was a problem. So it's quite complicated. So does your permit office feel like this? Or should your office be like this? Today, lots of people are starting to advocate that this should be the way permit offices are run, and that things should be automated, just as many other business processes are automated around an organization. So how do we do it? Wouldn't it be easier if we have a contractor who is able to start raising a permit request, in this instance on the 17th of May, to start work at 8:30 in the morning, but they're actually raising it 3 or 4 days in advance of the work needing to be done? Before that permit request is submitted, it goes through a number of checks. So are the RAMs current and valid? Yes. There's a training for all the individuals on that permit list valid and correct and current? Yes. Are the insurances for the company adequate cover for the job that's going to be done? Yes. And are we doing any pre-work PPE checks in case in instance of actually specifying what PPE is required for a job? One of the things that we're going to be releasing in ePermit soon is going to be a specific PPE module where it'll dynamically determine the PPE options based on the permit type, the service that they're working on, and the location of the proposed work. The PPE will be needed to be selected by that contractor in advance as part of that permit request process, and in the same way that we currently check things like training and competency and insurances, it'll check that the PPE is correct. PPE can also be either generic or it could be from a specified asset list. We have a client who specifies exactly what item of equipment down to its serial number is required for a particular job, because they know that that asset is properly maintained and is current. So not many people have to go down that path, but it is a path that can be covered again in an electronic system. And the system won't allow the wrong PPE to be specified on a permit, and the previous audit requires a contractor to confirm that this PPE is correct. So we're going to be tying that down in much the same way we do the compliance checks on training, competency, and so forth. So let's go back to Bob the Builder. He's put in his request and everything has been compliant. And when he presses the button to send, what happens is that email is now sent to different people within the organization, telling them that they have a request for a particular permit. And the permit types go to the individuals responsible for approving those types of permit. So the access permit goes to the site manager, confined space permit can go to health and safety, and hot works permit, as we've said before, may go to 2 or more people for them to sign off. In the process of thinking about the approval process, someone in the hot works team may say, actually, I need to have an isolation permit for this. So that will need to be kicked off internally to the internal FM team to make sure that they're actually able to put together the right isolations at the same time. So that adds another permit, if you like, into the bundle. Once all of those permits have been approved, then we're in a position where we can now send that approved permit bundle electronically and advise the contractor that they are now ready to do that work on the proposed date of Wednesday, the 17th of May, starting at 8:30. So that whole process has now taken place in advance. It's getting rid of those queues at the desk on the day that permits are required. It's pushing the contractors into a way of thinking that makes them do things in advance, because you need to go through the process of making sure that everything is in place at the right time. It also gives you the opportunity to check things like clashes. So the electronic permit system will check things like location clashes. Have we already approved a job to take place in the same location at the same time? Or have we already approved a job to be done on the same piece of equipment at the same time? Or have we already approved a job where we've got dependent services? One job needs the water supply on, the other job needs the water supply off. They're obviously mutually exclusive, so someone somewhere inside the organization needs to make a decision which job is the most important and which one do we bounce. And when you bounce it, that would obviously then go back to the contract to say the reasons why it has been bounced and that they need to reschedule it for another time. So all of those things are handled in advance, not sitting there on the day. And then once work has started, we have those other issues that came up as we talked about earlier on. This is where we're going to start introducing things like a mobile app. The version 4 of e-permits, which will be out later on this year, excuse me, will enable e-permits to be used on smartphones as well as ruggedized small real estate mobile devices. It's already available on larger devices like iPads and tablets, but this will be now on the real estate size of a smartphone. So you'll be able to now start thinking about issuing permits remotely or at the point of work electronically. Particularly important for hot works, where you need to go through the safety checklists before you actually issue the permit, sitting there with the contractor. You'll be able to request any additional isolations. Sometimes things come up in a job where an additional isolation is required. That'll need to be done. It can be done on the smartphone and it can be added to the permit bundle. You'll want to close off permits electronically at the point of work. Again, using the example of hot works, you'll need to go and inspect the location, make sure that the cool down period has been observed and that everything is satisfactory before you sign it off and the contractor is allowed to leave site. You also need to complete dynamic risk assessments at the point of work, and these need to be attached to the permit bundle. And you need to complete any safety audits and attach these to the bundle as well. And all of this with electronic signatures. Part of that bundle, we're also bringing in what we call an audit tool, so that you can do the things like the dynamic risk assessments, and you can log start and finish times of a job in a mini audit and confirm that all the right people are on the job, that RAMs have been read and understood. So getting, for example, the contractor to accept liability, that they have brought the right PPE, they've read the RAMs, they will adhere to the RAMs and so forth. And again, that will be attached to the permit bundle before the work starts. So if we look at an example, and this is just a mock-up, it's not what the system actually looks like. It's still in development stage at the moment. This is just a mock-up of the way it could work. So it's a simple audit, which would be part of the start of the job time logging process. And the user is presented with a number of simple questions. So for example, the start time, you click at the above on the start time, and it logs the start time of the job. Then it's asked you, are you the person specified on the team? Yes. Are you accepting that the RAMs have been read and understood by all people? And do you confirm that you brought the right PPE as specified on the permit to you with the job? So once you've done all of those, you are now in a position where when you press the confirm button, what this will do, it will now send a notification to the appropriate authorities within the company to say, this job has started at 09:17 on this date, and the contractor has accepted all liability for all the actions that are going to be done on the day. We're also adding things like GPS tagging. This is particularly important for things like remote working. So when you have an audit at the start and the finish of a job, the log and the start and the finish times are obviously logged, but we want to make sure they're from the same geographic location. So if someone actually logs out that the dog and duck 20 miles away from where the job was done, then you have evidence to dispute any invoice that is sent to you later on. So just little things that customers have asked us to think about adding into the system. They're all in the plan, and they're all going to play an important role in how e-permits are going to look in the future. So let's go back again to Bob. He's now got his permit bundle, and he's now ready to move on to start doing the work. The next stage then are things like doing dynamic risk assessments. So Bob has turned up at the site. He's going to be working in the particular area, and now he's got to do a dynamic risk assessment. So to do that, again on the mobile app, he would open up the ePermits app and download the appropriate or the pre-stored DRA. He'll then complete that DRA on site and then upload that permit to the permit bundle, and it's time-stamped. And any decisions based on the DRA are logged for audit trail purposes in case of any near miss or an incident. There are going to be instances where there may be no mobile or internet connection, but in that case, the DRA is held and uploaded automatically when a connection becomes available, and a timestamp will remain at the time it was completed, not the time it was uploaded. So that's then giving us proof that the contractor conducted the dynamic risk assessments prior to starting work. They were the required dynamic risk assessments, and any issues were logged in that process. Okay, so we've done our dynamic risk assessments. There may be some other audits or checks that we need to do, but then particularly for high risk work, we need to maybe be actually with the contractor when we're going through a safety checklist. So for the hot works part of the work, an appropriate authority will be with the contractor. They'll go through the safety checklist with them at the place of work, and then when they've signed that off, the time will be stamped. In this instance, at 8 minutes past 10 on that day, that the safety checklists have all been conducted and that he is happy to approve the work. And that is the point then when the permits are actually issued, or the hot works permit is issued. And this will all be done again now with electronic signatures. So a planned enhancement in the current version that should be out in the next couple of months will allow you to approve permits even when you're not at your place of work. I don't know whether that's good news or bad news. If you're happy to sign off permits while you're lying on the beach in Spain, good luck. The contractor can also sign acceptance of permits at the point of issue, and they can sign the return of a permit when the job has been done. So that whole current process that has to be gone through from the start of a job, of people signing it off, and then obviously closing it off at the end of the process, will now all be done electronically rather than having additional pieces of paper that then have to be uploaded later on in the process. And as you can guess, sometimes these pieces of paper just don't appear. So there's no proof that they were either done or if there was a problem. There's also going to be the ability to add isolations in for jobs in progress. We all know that reality is always different to the plan. So there can be situations where an extra isolation or an isolation is required once a job has started. New enhancement that again is out in the next couple of months will mean that isolations can be requested and approved and added to the existing permit bundle for an existing job. And again, that process of going through the checklists of making sure it's been properly isolated and signed off and then re-energized at the end of the process will all be part of that electronic process and the sign-off. Any compliance checks that are still required to be carried out will still be carried out against the RAMs and training encompasses of contractors specified on the permits. So the safety checklists have now been completed and done, and what that will mean now is that we're able to look at the final stage of the process. And that final stage is where we close out the audit. So closing out the audit will mean, again, doing a checklist. Was the job done safely? Were there any issues? The ability to take photographs of the point of work, upload those photographs, start to build a non-compliance matrix for any contractors. So if you have a contractor that's continually causing problems, you can log all of the issues that you may have. They'll all be stored in e-permits, and then when it comes to your annual review with the contractor, you can pull out the list of any non-compliances that they've had and have it out with them, as it were. You may find that there are situations where you've had 20 jobs in the last year, and on 18 of those jobs, a particular individual was present, and you always had a problem. You're then able to advise that contractor that you are removing that contractor's name or that employee's name from the approved people that are allowed to work on your site, and you have the ability to do that. So lots of information post-work is also available from an electronic system that gives you ammunition and information that allows you to make knowledgeable decisions on future work. So then the job is done, and you have all of these different elements. At the moment, a lot of these are paper, and you have to pull them together. But what they'll be in an electronic system is they'll all be pulled together into one bundle, all time-stamped in the sequence that they were completed and done. Nothing's missing. The job is fully audit trailed, and everything is stored with easy future access, should you need to, because of any inquiries, incidents, or whatever that come up in the future. So is it time to put paper permits to work in the bin? We believe the answer is yes. And the things that we're doing in the next month to a year will be able to bring that whole process into a paper-free process. And we believe that's going to be very significant in contributing to health and safety and well-being of individuals and companies across the world. So I hope that's been of interest to you. Details of contact details are shown on the screen. I'd be very happy to speak with anybody if they contact me by email, and I can provide demonstrations of the system to go alongside the information that you've already seen.